20 parking tickets in 4 months. Margaret Collins, 86 years old, sat trembling in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom. White cane gripped in both hands, dark glasses hiding eyes that stopped seeing 17 years ago. Total fines, $2,899. For a car she swore she'd never owned. Parking Authority Director Stephen Walsh stood confident, computer printout in hand. The violations were real. The debt was real. Time to pay up. But Judge Frank Caprio was staring at something that didn't make sense. How does a blind woman rack up 20 parking tickets? Subscribe to All Rise so you don't miss stories like this. We share Judge Caprio's most unbelievable cases every single day. Margaret's hands shook as she touched the citation stack. Papers she couldn't read, violations she couldn't understand, fines she couldn't afford on $200 monthly Social Security. Her daughter, Sarah Collins, 54, sat behind her. She'd driven Margaret to court, taken time off work, brought documents proving something impossible was happening. Stephen Walsh tapped his tablet screen. Your Honor, the violations are clear. 2018 Toyota Camry, Rhode Island plate, JKL 4792, registered to Margaret Collins, 847 Maple Street, Providence. 20 tickets across 4 months. Different locations, different times of day. All charged to an 86-year-old blind woman. Frank leaned forward. Ms. Collins, is 847 Maple Street your address? Yes, sir. Her voice barely a whisper. I've lived there 42 years. And do you own a 2018 Toyota Camry? Margaret's face crumpled. Your Honor, I don't own any car. I haven't driven since 2008. I'm blind. The courtroom went silent. Stephen shifted his weight. Your Honor, DMV records clearly show. Frank raised his hand. You're blind, Ms. Collins? Yes, sir. Diabetic retinopathy. I lost my sight completely by 2008. My daughter takes me everywhere. Grocery shopping, doctor appointments, church. I can't drive. I can't even see the curb to know where a car would park. Frank picked up the citation list. 20 violations. 4 different cities. Some during business hours. Some late at night. Some in parking lots Margaret had never heard of. Mr. Walsh, these tickets span 4 months across Providence, Warwick, Cranston, and Pawtucket. Different times, different days. Did anyone at Parking Authority question how an 86-year-old accumulated violations across 4 cities? Stephen's confidence flickered. Our system processes violations automatically based on license plate registration. Did you verify Ms. Collins actually owns this vehicle? The DMV registration. Did you verify she can legally operate a vehicle? That she has a driver's license? That she can see? Stephen had no answer. What Frank did next changed everything. Bailiff Rodriguez, I need you to contact Rhode Island DMV immediately. I want the complete registration file for license plate JKL 4792. I want to know when it was registered, who filed the paperwork, and what identification was used. And I want someone from DMV fraud investigation here within the hour. Margaret started crying. Quiet sobs. Sarah put her hand on her mother's shoulder. Frank's voice softened. Ms. Collins, when did you stop driving? June 2008, 17 years ago. My vision got so bad I couldn't see the road. I went to DMV, surrendered my license, got a state ID card instead. Sarah stood. Your Honor, I have my mother's ID card. It's clearly marked non-driver. Issued 2008. She legally cannot drive. Frank examined the card. Rhode Island State ID. Photo of Margaret. Big red letters. Non-driver identification. He held it up for Stephen to see. Mr. Walsh, Ms. Collins has had a non-driver ID since 2008. Your system charged her for 20 parking violations across 4 cities. That didn't raise any flags? Stephen's face reddened. We process violations based on plate registration. If the DMV says she owns the vehicle, the DMV also says she surrendered her license 17 years ago. Frank's tone sharpened. She has a document proving she legally cannot drive. How does someone without a license, without sight, accumulate 20 parking tickets? The courtroom doors opened. DMV investigator Rachel Torres, 41, entered with a laptop and a thick file folder. Her expression was grim. Your Honor, I pulled the registration for plate JKL 4792 the moment your office called. She opened her laptop. This is fraud. Systematic fraud. Frank's jaw tightened. Explain. Rachel turned the screen toward the bench. The 2018 Toyota Camry, with plate JKL 4792, was registered in Margaret Collins' name 4 months ago. But Ms. Collins didn't register it. She didn't sign any paperwork. She didn't provide any identification. Then who did? A DMV clerk named Dennis Morrison. He processed the registration electronically using Ms. Collins' name, address, and social security number. No in-person verification, no signature. No proof of vehicle purchase or insurance. Sarah gasped. Someone stole my mother's identity? Rachel nodded. Dennis Morrison has been under investigation for 3 weeks. We've identified 41 fraudulent registrations he processed over 11 months, all using elderly people's identities, people who'd surrendered licenses, people in nursing homes, people who couldn't fight back. Margaret's sobs grew louder. I don't understand. Why would someone use my name? Rachel's voice filled with anger. Dennis sold these fake registrations for $1,800 each. People with suspended licenses who needed to drive. People with warrants who wanted untraceable vehicles. People trying to avoid accountability. He'd create a registration in an innocent person's name, give the buyer the paperwork and plates, and route all tickets and violations to the victim. The math was sickening. 41 fake registrations, $1,800 each. Dennis Morrison had made $73,800 by destroying innocent lives. Frank's face darkened. How many tickets did these 41 victims accumulate? Rachel scrolled through data. Combined, over 600 violations, total fines exceeding $87,000. Most victims are elderly, on fixed incomes, confused about why they're receiving citations. Some have already paid thousands, thinking they were legally obligated. Margaret's $2,890 debt was just one piece of a massive criminal operation. Stephen Walsh looked pale. He'd brought Margaret to court without questioning anything, just wanted his money. Frank leaned back. Ms. Collins, you didn't register this vehicle. You don't own it. You can't drive it. These violations aren't yours. But the letters say I have to pay. You don't. These citations are fraudulent. Dismissed. All of them. Margaret's face crumpled with relief. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. But Frank wasn't finished. Mr. Walsh, Parking Authority brought collections action against an 86-year-old blind woman for violations she couldn't possibly commit. You never verified she owned the vehicle. Never checked if she could legally drive. Never questioned how someone without sight accumulated 20 tickets. You just wanted payment. Stephen stammered. We rely on DMV registration data. You relied on a broken system. Ms. Collins could have lost everything because Parking Authority didn't ask one simple question. Is this possible? Frank turned to Rachel. Where is Dennis Morrison now? Federal custody. FBI arrested him this morning. We're identifying all 41 victims, dismissing all fraudulent citations, and launching a compensation program. What's he facing? Identity theft, fraud, conspiracy, abuse of public office. He's looking at 15 to 20 years federal prison. The courtroom buzzed. 20 parking tickets had exposed a fraud ring affecting 41 innocent victims. But Rachel had more. Your Honor, there's something else. Margaret Collins wasn't Dennis's only victim in this courtroom's jurisdiction. Frank's eyes narrowed. How many others? 6. 6 elderly Providence residents who surrendered licenses due to age or disability. All had vehicles fraudulently registered in their names. All accumulated tickets. 2 already paid over $4,000 combined before we caught this. Sarah's voice shook. My mother almost paid. She was terrified, kept saying, "The government says I owe money. I have to pay." She was ready to drain her savings for violations she didn't commit. Margaret touched her daughter's hand. I thought I'd done something wrong. I couldn't remember driving, but I couldn't remember a lot of things. I thought maybe I'd forgotten. Maybe my memory was going. The letters said I owed money. Official letters. I believed them. That's what Dennis Morrison counted on. Confusion, fear, elderly people doubting themselves rather than questioning the system. Frank addressed Rachel. I want every victim notified, every ticket dismissed, every dollar paid refunded, credit reports corrected, and I want recommendations for preventing this from happening again. Already underway, Your Honor. We're implementing mandatory in-person verification for all vehicle registrations, cross-checking against surrendered licenses and non-driver IDs, flagging any registration attempt for someone over 80 or in a care facility. What about the buyers, the people who purchased these fake registrations? Harder to trace, most abandoned the vehicles once tickets piled up. We've recovered 14 vehicles so far, all linked to other crimes. Unpaid tolls, hit and runs, drug trafficking. The buyers specifically wanted untraceable vehicles. Every one of those crimes had tickets sent to innocent elderly victims, people like Margaret, who couldn't understand why the government said they owed money for violations they didn't commit. Frank looked at Margaret. Ms. Collins, how did you discover these tickets? Sarah answered. Mom gets confused with mail. I check it twice a week. 3 weeks ago, I found 6 envelopes she hadn't opened. All parking citations. I thought it was a mistake. But more kept coming. 2 or 3 a week. Different cities, different violations. It didn't make sense. What made you bring her to court? The final notice. It said if she didn't pay $2,890 within 10 days, they'd garnish her Social Security. Mom only gets $12,200 a month. She can't survive on less. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what. So I brought her here. Frank smiled. You saved your mother. If you'd just paid to make it go away, the tickets would have kept coming. The debt would have grown, and Dennis Morrison would still be selling fake registrations. Margaret's case became the thread that unraveled everything. 41 victims identified. Over 600 fraudulent citations dismissed. $87,000 in fake debt erased. Credit scores restored. Social Security payments protected. And Dennis Morrison pleaded guilty to all charges. Sentenced to 18 years federal prison. Ordered to pay full restitution to every victim. But the damage ran deep. 3 of the 41 victims had died before the fraud was discovered. They died thinking they owed money they didn't have. Died confused and scared. Died believing they'd done something wrong when they were innocent. One 89-year-old woman with dementia had 12 tickets for a car she'd never owned. Her family found her crying over the citations, unable to understand them, convinced she was losing her mind. She died 2 weeks before Dennis was arrested. Never knew she was innocent. A 91-year-old man in a nursing home had 18 tickets. Social Security already garnished. Down to $840 monthly income for medical care, food, everything. He'd stopped eating to save money, thinking he had to pay the debt. His family discovered the fraud when he was hospitalized for malnutrition. These weren't just numbers. They were lives destroyed by a DMV clerk who saw elderly people as profit opportunities. Frank kept Margaret's 20 parking tickets in his chambers. He shows them to visitors. Citations for an 86-year-old blind woman who hadn't driven in 17 years. Margaret Collins came to my courtroom with 20 parking tickets, he tells them. She was terrified, ready to drain her savings to pay for violations she couldn't commit. She's blind. She has a non-driver ID. She physically cannot drive. But the system demanded $2,809 anyway. He spreads the citations across his desk. 20 tickets across 4 cities. Different times. Different days. Not one person asked, "Is this possible?" Not the DMV. Not parking authority. Not collections. They just wanted money. Frank picks up Margaret's non-driver ID card. She'd given it to him as a gift, framed with a note. "Thank you for asking the question that saved my life." This ID proves she can't drive. Has proven it since 2008. But the system registered 3 different vehicles to her over 11 months before we caught it. 3 vehicles, 47 total tickets, $6,800 total debt, all for someone who legally cannot operate a vehicle. He pauses. If Sarah hadn't brought Margaret to court, if I hadn't asked how a blind woman gets parking tickets, Dennis Morrison would still be stealing identities. 41 innocent people would still be drowning in fake debt. And elderly people across Rhode Island would keep believing they were losing their minds when they were really being victimized. The case inspired Margaret's law in Rhode Island. Mandatory in-person identity verification for vehicle registrations, automatic cross-checking against non-driver IDs and surrendered licenses, annual verification letters to anyone over 75 listing all vehicles registered in their name. Parking authority must verify vehicle ownership before collections. 7 other states adopted similar laws within 18 months. But it came too late for the 3 victims who died confused and afraid. Margaret Collins still lives at 847 Maple Street. Sarah still checks her mail twice a week. They're vigilant now. Every envelope opened, every letter examined, every charge questioned. "I couldn't see the tickets," Margaret says. "I'm blind. Someone had to read them to me. But I felt their weight. The fear, the confusion, thinking I'd done something terrible and couldn't remember, thinking my memory was failing, thinking I was losing my mind." She touches her white cane. "This cane is proof I can't drive. I've carried it 17 years. But the system registered 3 cars to me anyway, sent me 47 tickets, threatened to take my Social Security. Nobody asked if it was possible. They just demanded money." Margaret became an advocate for elder fraud prevention. She speaks at senior centers, warns about identity theft, teaches people to question impossible bills. "Dennis Morrison thought I'd be easy," she says. "Blind, elderly, confused, scared. He thought I'd pay without fighting. He was almost right. I was ready to drain my savings." But Sarah asked questions. Judge Caprio asked questions. And that questioning saved 41 people. She smiles. "I'm blind, I can't see parking signs or meters or street names, but I can see injustice, and I can fight back. Judge Frank Caprio was honored by the National Federation of the Blind for exposing the identity theft ring. In his acceptance speech, he said, "Margaret Collins walked into my courtroom with 20 parking tickets for a car she'd never owned. She was blind, scared, and ready to pay money she didn't owe for violations she couldn't commit. The system had failed her at every level." He held up her white cane. "This should have been the first clue. A blind woman with a non-driver ID and 20 parking tickets. Someone should have noticed, should have questioned, should have protected her. Instead, they threatened collections." Frank's voice hardened. "Dennis Morrison stole 41 identities, made 73,800, destroyed lives. He targeted the most vulnerable people he could find, elderly, blind, in nursing homes, people he knew wouldn't fight back. And the system helped him by never asking, 'Is this possible?'" The 20 tickets that saved 41 lives. If Sarah had just paid Margaret's $2,890 to make it go away, Dennis would still be operating. The 41 victims would still be accumulating tickets. Collections would still be garnishing Social Security. And elderly people would keep thinking they were losing their minds. "Those 20 tickets saved me," Margaret says. "If Sarah had paid them, I'd have kept getting more. Eventually, they'd have taken everything. My savings, my Social Security, my peace of mind. I'd have died thinking I was a criminal who couldn't remember her crimes." She keeps one dismissed citation framed on her wall. Violation: parking in a loading zone. Location: 451 Broad Street, Providence. Time: 2:47 p.m., March 14th. Fine: $100. "I was home that day," Margaret says. "I'm always home. I can't go anywhere alone. I'm blind. But someone was on Broad Street. Someone with my identity. Someone driving a car registered in my name. And I got the ticket. That's the crime." She touches the frame. This piece of paper represents everything wrong with a system that values money over people. But it also represents everything right about a judge who values truth over convenience. Margaret smiles. "Judge Caprio could have just made me pay. Easier that way. But he asked one question: how is this possible? And that question saved 41 people from a criminal who thought blind elderly people were easy targets." What do you think about Dennis Morrison getting 18 years? Should DMV employees who commit fraud face even harsher penalties? Should parking authorities be required to verify impossible violations before collections? Drop your thoughts below and subscribe to All Rise for more incredible courtroom stories where Judge Frank Caprio asks the questions that expose the truth. Margaret's Law now protects elderly citizens in 8 states. Subscribe to see more cases where one person's courage changes the system.